A-holes, losers, fools, we always have to deal with them, don't we? And more intensely than usual, we have to deal with them when we are on a program, when we're trying to lose weight. Of course, that is not that different than any other endeavor in life. Any other time we put ourselves out there, when we take a chance, when we try to achieve something extraordinary, we often have to put up with these fools. Now, I thought I was done talking about this subject. By the way, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Rendelstein from ThinTech Weight Loss. But this subject keeps rearing its ugly head. And so I constantly have to talk about it, is what I find. The latest iteration, if we can call it that, or the reason I was reminded, there's been a couple of people as of late who have come into the office upset because of comments that they've heard from other people. One of them is a lovely young lady. She lost a bunch of weight on the program, I think 60 pounds or so. She looks fantastic. She feels fantastic. And she was at an event recently. She was at her church of all places. And people kept coming up to her. And of course, some said, "You look fantastic." And others had nasty or semi-nasty comments to make to her. This is not the first time this has happened. Again, I've heard this over and over. The first time I heard it was there was a lady who was about 65 years old, overweight her whole life, lost a bunch of weight, went from being morbidly obese to being very lean. She looked beautiful. And she actually cried to me because her friends were giving her crap. What is wrong with people? Why do they do that? We'll delve into that in a minute. But she cried to me. She said, "Why do they have to do this? I feel so good." Now, at its very worst, I have seen people stop doing the program. I have seen the upset so intense that people did not continue with their goals. Can you imagine? It's so silly. It's so absurd. It's so ridiculous. So here's the problem. Comments from other people can sometimes serve the purpose of inhibiting us. What do I mean by inhibiting or inhibition? Well, that's a feeling of unease where you're not comfortable, where your focus might be on the inside instead of on the outside and what you're trying to accomplish. And as I said, at its very worst, that could serve as a stop, as a complete stop. Of course, it's a barrier like any other barrier. Most of them we get through. But sometimes we don't. And even when we do, to have to do it by fending off these remarks, by having to have these conversations, by feeling bad about ourselves or pissed off because we're dealing with these idiots, it makes it less sweet and less satisfying of an experience. So do we have to handle these things? You're absolutely right, we do. I have a video that I made just about this that I send to people who are on the program, right? But it's not enough for that. I have to do it now also, just sending it out there into the ether, into the airwaves of the internet, because everybody really needs this information. So the first question is, why do people behave like that? Why do people make comments about others? It's not necessary, is it? Well, there's several reasons. One is obviously jealousy. Another is that some people they have no understanding of boundaries. They think it's their job to comment on everything. These are people who really don't have much of a life. Another is just plain rudeness. Another is a hidden anger from people. Sometimes they're reminded of their own failings. There are multiple reasons that people do this. Now, the question arises, should we have some compassion for these people? And the answer to that is yes, I believe we should. But let me just be more clear. Let me take a couple of steps back and let's get some clarity here. What are some of these comments? Well, you might find yourself at a dinner party and, and you're saying, well, listen, I can't eat that, or I don't want to eat that. I'm on a program right now. I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to do something for myself. And the comments might be things like, oh, come on, live a little. Right? This is when a person is inviting you into a conspiracy so they can feel better about what they're doing. Their focus is not on support. This could be a friend. This could be a family member. They're not trying to support you. That's not where they are at that moment in time. Where they are is, I don't want my experience to be ruined. I don't want to feel bad about what I'm doing. So I'm inviting you to not do what you're supposed to be doing so we can share in this little conspiracy and we could all feel good about ourselves. So that would be an example of a comment. Now, the comments run the gamut, right? Sometimes they're very subtle, and sometimes they're very overtly just rude and even vicious. A very common thing that we'll see is that these kind of comments from people are the kind of comments where you're not really sure, right? Because they're not very overt, but they definitely have kind of an edge to them. They're pointed. Maybe when they're first made, you don't think anything of it, but then you leave the situation, you're like, I don't think I like that. This is a very difficult situation to be in a lot of ways, right? This is like when people say, oh, you look great. I hope you can keep it off. It's just like a sharp stab, like in the back, right under the ribs there. A shot to the liver. It's very common, unfortunately. Now, let me just make a comment about those types of comments, about the ones that aren't overt. It's much easier to deal with an overt comment, right? Someone says, oh, you're going to fail. You say, okay, F you. We're done. I have nothing more to say to you. Okay, that's easy. You're a jerk, curse you out. Most of the people listening to this are from New Jersey. We know how to handle an overt attack. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's more difficult to handle these covert attacks, these covert comments, the ones that aren't so obvious, because it puts us in a bad position. What did she mean? What am I supposed to do with that? But another thing that puts us in a bad position is our own perception of our own strength and how strong we're supposed to be. Oh, I don't care. People can make all the comments they want. That doesn't get in my way. Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just has a little niggling effect on you where it's just eating at you at some level, and it should have no effect, obviously. Like, we want to be bulletproof. My attitude has always been, well, why do I need to disarm the a-holes? I should be bulletproof. It's not the best attitude. We have to be aware that we can be affected to some degree. It's very interesting. The social interactions, there are people who are kind of intuitively more sensitive to this. I want to say, dudes are less sensitive. Our thing is like, who cares what that idiot says? We're so strong that, nothing can affect us. There are other people who are hypersensitive. They hear a comment that doesn't sound right, and they're just attacking. I'm not sure that's the best strategy either. These seem to be kind of like two sides of the same coin, right? Too much passivity, too much aggression. I'm not sure that either of those things really handle the problem. So let's get back to the idea of, should we have some compassion for people who are making these kind of comments? And my answer to that would be, well, yes and no. As I suggested before, they might not feel too good about themselves. and they don't know what to do with those feelings of, guilt or inadequacy. So that might be what's leading them to come at you. Now, it's never okay for anyone to come at you for something good that you're trying to do, but that's where it could be coming from. Another place it comes from is there is a cultural component, and this is very interesting. I feel like, and I have no evidence about this, just my own experience, but I feel like people from other countries, from the old country, this is not a nationalist or xenophobic comment, it's just more of a comment on cultures. I feel like they think they have more license. In this country, we have a certain understanding, a cultural understanding about how we're not supposed to get involved in people's business. But I know that, for example, my grandmothers would make comments all the time. They thought everything was their business. I don't know why. I don't know where they got that idea. I think it's some old European mentality, right? Everyone comments on everyone else's thing. Now, they were confronted about it on several occasions by several different family members on comments that they would make. Now, we're talking specifically about the context of weight, appearance. I had a grandmother who used to make comments about another family member. I won't say who. I don't want to say who. But she'd always make comments about the weight. I mean, they both did. I certainly would hear it. I mean, I would, as they were feeding me, they were telling me I'm getting too fat, but eat more, But there were several incidents with another family member where there was crying and there was just a lot of upset. And the response from my grandmother was like, "What? I'm trying to help." As if anyone needs that kind of help. Who in their right mind is not aware that people are aware of how they look? That it might be a sensitivity. So why comment either way? Now, support is a different subject, isn't it? You do want to be supportive of somebody. But if you have a sense that, they're sensitive about that, it just doesn't make sense. Or there's a different way to approach the subject. Believe me, I know about this. Being in this field of weight loss, I see people all the time. I want to go up to them and say something. I mean, as a matter of both of business and also of concern, I want to be able to say something to them. I've never found the right language, or at least I don't think I have. I've thought about creating cards or t-shirts that said, hey, ask me how I lost 100 pounds or something like that. But these are very sensitive subjects. Most people are aware. The only reason to approach somebody, and if you do, it should be out of great concern, is in order to be of assistance. Maybe somebody doesn't know the way. They don't know how. But as far as these comments that we're referring to now, and the cultural aspect and the familial aspect with it, I feel like everybody who's listening knows someone like this as part of their own family. There are those people who sit and live in constant judgment. Again, can we feel compassion for these people? Can we try to understand it and at least say, they're a sad kind of type? Yes. Does that mean it's okay? No. They do need to understand that it's not okay with you. Other people may put up with it, but you don't necessarily have to. So I think a good place to start when you hear comments like this, which aren't inevitable. I have a lot of clients who say, no, nobody's ever said a thing. My friends are only supportive. Unfortunately, I have many, many more who are subjected to those type of things. So much so that when I did a survey years ago asking what the number one barrier was on the program. This is what came up. Comments from other people. And it pisses me off. I know I just said we should have some compassion for people who do that, but it does piss me off. If you're just joining right now, the name of this segment that we're talking about now is A-hole, is it haters, a-holes, and crabs? These are people who make comments when we're trying to achieve something. And these comments serve the purpose of inhibiting us, of suppressing our desires, and sometimes suppressing even our efforts if we allow it to. Where does the idea of the crabs come into place? Why am I talking about crabs? You know, there's this metaphor, which I believe is true, but it's about crabs in a bucket. Apparently, when fishermen fish for crabs, when they get them, they put them in a bucket. They don't put a cover on top of that bucket. Why not? Because if a crab tries to crawl out, if they try to escape, the other crabs will pull them back down. And this is sadly how human beings function sometimes. They're focused on pulling other people back, on not allowing others to get ahead. Who wants that? Healthier people, healthier societies want to push people up, want to make people better. That's really a much better approach, but it's not always like that. And that's why we're having this conversation. That's why it keeps coming up again and again and again. And I want people to be armed and to have armor against it. Not just assume that, it'll take care of itself or whatnot. So this is how I counsel people. The first thing is when you hear the comment, let's say you're at a function, you see someone you haven't seen in a while, and they make a comment to you. It might be as, rough and aggressive as, oh, that'll never work, what you're doing. Mr. or Mrs. Know-it-all. They've failed before, so their assumption is that everyone else is going to fail. And God forbid if the other person doesn't fail. So if they say something like that, or if they say something that's very, much less obvious than that kind of backstabbing comment we talked about, first, try to understand, take a moment. Where's this coming from? Is it coming from a good place? There are those people who sincerely may be trying to help. I gave the example of, grandparents before, or people from different cultures. Or is it coming just from a vicious place? Either way, we don't stop at the understanding, but just making the effort to understand will give us a little insight and will put us in a better place, as opposed to just reacting. That's what we do not want to do. We don't want to react. We want to act. Right? We want to respond with some volition and some understanding. Now, the best thing to do, and by the way, it's not a bad idea, if you're starting a program, it's not a bad idea to do this proactively before people have chances to make comments. So in other words, if you find yourself at lunch with friends or family, and and you're worried about being the center of attention because you're going to be eating very differently than they are, and you don't want to have to explain yourself, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, listen, guys, I'm doing this detox for my health. I am not, by the way, don't say weight loss, right? That's too triggering for a lot of people for various reasons. Again, usually having to do with their own transgressions, their own failures. Right? I'm doing a detox thing, for my health. There are certain things that I'm not going to eat. So, please understand that. Okay, good. Move on. Whatever. Most people won't care that much. All right. But that could be done also once a person makes a comment. Someone makes a comment to you and you say, hey, listen, I'm doing this detox. Please don't bust my colognes. I'd like your support on this. It's going to make it a lot easier for me. I don't want to hear a bunch of crap. Oh, yeah, of course. Sometimes you're waking people up because they're unaware of their own BS. So it's better to just kind of ask for it. Ask for what you want. You might be surprised. Okay? Now, it's also possible that you can do that, and yet a person won't stop. And now you need to have a much different conversation. They have to be very clear that it's not okay. You might want to match their aggression. You might want to exceed it. Okay, but you don't want it getting on you is the thing. All right, you've already asked them nicely, maybe more than once. Can you imagine asking somebody for their support in something that you're trying to do that's important to you, and you explain that, and yet they still can't get off of it? This will happen on rare occasions, but it will happen. At that point, you have complete license to speak to them however you want. You can get totally Jersey on them, or Brooklyn, or the Bronx, whatever the case may be. All right, no holds barred. No Marcus of Queensberry rules anymore. Gloves are off. All right, and of course, you might just say, okay, you know what? I'll speak to you in 6 months. Perfectly okay. Because the understanding has to be about this is your health. This is something that matters to you, and nothing's going to get in your way or make you feel shitty about yourself when you're doing something that is wonderful. When you're losing weight, when you're doing it in the right way, in a way that makes you healthier, right? I think we could all acknowledge that there are ways that don't make you healthier. But if you're doing it in a way that's making you healthier, that is a wonderful thing. That is going to lengthen your life. That is going to improve the quality of your life. Ideally, it improves the quality of your relationships, which is why I don't want the default to be super aggressive. Because ultimately, you want to be closer to other people, even people who forget themselves and who are only temporary assholes. I think I could say that word, right? Temporary? So that's why we don't go full bore right away. That's why we're just honest and asking for help, asking for support. But then if they won't give it up, then we have a completely different conversation. We have to realize the not okayness of that situation. We have to just see that very clearly, and without justifying it by saying, oh, yeah, I can handle it or whatnot. That's not the point. We train people how to treat us. And of course, some of us have a much better EQ than others, right? Emotional intelligence. Some of us just know in social interactions. Other ones don't. Or other ones have more difficulty with it, you know? So this is what I wanted to discuss today. I hope that it makes a lot of sense. If you have any questions, reach out. If you need any help with this, with executing it, with understanding it better, reach out. This is a real phenomenon that we see. You should feel great about the things you do that are designed to make you better. And again, we're talking about this in the context of weight loss, because I feel like it's, I don't know, more acute or more obvious in that situation. But does it happen in other contexts? Oh, I have no doubt that it does. Right? Probably when you're, building a business, and someone's telling you you're doing it wrong, or whatever they're telling you you're doing wrong. Sometimes you're doing it wrong. There's a technical thing, right? But sometimes, just haters or temporary haters like to tell you that you're doing it wrong when they really don't know any better, and you're really convicted about the path that you're on. Okay. So I think that's all I have to say today. I could probably go on, but I'm not going to. So I will see everyone next week and have a fantastic week. Take care.